The story of Vistara Flight 944. Heavy rain poured over northern India. Visibility was almost zero. An Airbus A320 was on its final approach, preparing to land on runway 27 at Lucknow Airport. The aircraft had already been holding in the air for 2 hours longer than planned, and its fuel reserves were reaching a critical level. After several failed landing attempts, the weather continued to worsen. The lives of 155 passengers were now hanging by a thread. Let's revisit the story of Vistara Flight 944. July 15, 2019, Mumbai, India. Vistara Airlines Flight 944 was preparing for its journey from Mumbai to Delhi, two of the busiest airports in India, each handling millions of travelers every year. This flight was one of the few daily round trips between the two cities, serving both business travelers and tourists. The flight was scheduled to take about 2 hours, with an expected arrival time in Delhi at 5 p.m. local time. The aircraft assigned for this mission was an Airbus A320neo, renowned for its excellent fuel efficiency, a mainstay for short and medium-haul routes. Delivered in 2018, the aircraft had accumulated 517 flight hours and had only recently joined Vistara's growing fleet. Vistara Airlines, founded in 2015 as a joint venture between the Tata Group and Singapore Airlines, had quickly risen to become one of India's leading domestic carriers, second only to Indigo and Air India. Pre-flight preparations. As 155 passengers boarded the Airbus A320, a fuel truck was refueling the aircraft with 8,500 kilograms of fuel, an amount calculated to cover the flight to Delhi and provide enough reserve fuel for a possible diversion to an alternate airport if necessary. The flight crew began their pre-flight checks. Both pilots were relatively young. The captain, age 30, had logged over 8,500 flight hours. The first officer, age 28, had 1,600 hours of experience. Before takeoff, the pilots received the flight briefing, which included weather reports and designated alternate airports. The report listed Ahmedabad as the primary alternate and Lucknow as the secondary. However, when the pilots reviewed the flight plan, they noticed the order had been reversed. Lucknow was listed as the primary alternate, and Jaipur appeared as the secondary. This small discrepancy, though seeming minor, could create confusion at a critical moment. Knowing which alternate airports were available is essential for quick decision-making in emergencies, and this clerical mistake would later play a key role in the tragedy of Flight 944. Takeoff and early flight. At 2:57 p.m. local time, the aircraft was cleared for pushback. The skies were slightly hazy, but mostly clear. After starting the engines, the A320 taxied to runway 27. The crew completed final checks, all systems normal. With takeoff clearance from the tower, the plane smoothly accelerated and lifted off. It climbed steadily to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and the flight settled into a routine phase. The crew maintains regular communication with air traffic control, monitoring the flight's progress. However, they overlooked one crucial detail. They did not continuously check weather updates along the route and at the destination. That oversight would soon prove fatal, because the latest weather reports from nearby airports were vital for making the right decisions if a diversion became necessary. The final struggle of the Vistara Flight 944. As Flight 944 approached Delhi, the crew received a troubling report. A severe thunderstorm had formed over the airport, accompanied by strong winds, torrential rain, and visibility dropping sharply to just 1 kilometer. Such conditions pose a serious threat to landing. While the pilots continued their approach, air traffic control delivered even worse news. Due to worsening weather, no aircraft were being permitted to land. Several planes had already performed go-arounds, and the meteorological office expected no improvement soon. The tower instructed Flight 944 to enter a holding pattern, a standard procedure when arrivals are delayed. Inside the holding area, the aircraft circled along a fixed loop, remaining within a designated airspace while awaiting clearance. The crew stayed focused, monitoring the weather closely and evaluating possible diversion options. But as the aircraft continued to circle, conditions deteriorated further. Visibility remained extremely poor, and turbulence grew increasingly violent. Despite frequent updates from air traffic control, there was still no clearance to land. The time spent in the air kept increasing, and the fuel level was dropping rapidly. Soon, Amadio Airport was no longer a viable alternate destination. By choosing to keep waiting, the crew had unintentionally lost their safest option. Running out of time. At this point, the pilots fully realized the gravity of the situation: worsening weather, rapidly dwindling fuel, and no landing clearance in Delhi. Every passing minute now carried immense risk. With no hope of landing soon, the crew decided that if Delhi remained closed, they would divert to Lucknow. However, Jaipur was actually the safer choice. It was closer and had better weather. But Vistara had no operational base in Jaipur, which meant logistical difficulties for ground services and passenger handling. Although the final decision was technically the pilots', the company's policy likely influenced their preference for Lucknow. Despite Jaipur being safer, the crew chose to keep holding, hoping the weather in Delhi would clear. The desperate approach. 20 minutes later, only 3,800 kilograms of fuel remained on board. The crew informed air traffic control that they could wait no longer than 10 more minutes. After that, they would be forced to divert. Just as the situation neared a crisis point, good news finally came. At 5:57 p.m. local time, Delhi Tower cleared Flight 944 for approach. The aircraft was 64 kilometers from the airport, and controllers began providing ILS, Instrument Landing System, guidance for runway 29. Relief swept through the cockpit. Despite the still hostile weather, the pilots prepared eagerly for the approach. This was their only chance. But as the aircraft lined up with the runway centerline, conditions worsened again. Shifting crosswinds and heavy turbulence made the approach extremely difficult. The aircraft rocked violently. The pilots struggled to keep control. As the landing gear and flaps were extended, the turbulence intensified. Inside the cabin, passengers were tossed about, gripping their armrests tightly as fear spread through the cabin. Although there was still a glimmer of hope for landing, at an altitude of about 250 feet, the wind suddenly shifted direction, creating a dangerous tailwind exceeding 15 knots. With a wet runway and limited braking distance, the pilots made the critical decision to abort the landing. They initiated a go-around and climbed away from the runway. The race against fuel. After the missed approach, the crew quickly checked the weather in Lucknow, preparing to divert there. But fuel was burning at an alarming rate. Every minute now mattered. The atmosphere in the cabin grew tense. Panic began to spread among the passengers. Unaware of the danger, they had not been informed of the true situation. Neither the captain nor the cabin crew explained what was happening, leaving everyone confused and terrified. Meanwhile, a new problem emerged in the cockpit. Severe thunderstorms had now blocked the direct route to Lucknow.
To avoid the most dangerous storm cells and the restricted airspace near Agra, the crew was forced to take a longer detour to the south. This extra distance consumed even more fuel, increasing the pressure with every minute. Despite worsening conditions, the pilots still insisted on heading to Lucknow, even when air traffic control suggested diverting to Jaipur, the safer option. According to their calculations, if they continued toward Lucknow, they would arrive with only about 1 ton of fuel remaining, leaving almost no margin for error.
The final descent of Vistara Flight 944. Vistara Flight 944 continued its journey toward Lucknow. For a short while, the flight remained stable until the descent phase, when it was met with intense rainfall and severe turbulence. As the aircraft approached runway 27 at Lucknow Airport, the approach controller reported that, due to thunderstorms and heavy rain, visibility was down to just 475 meters. The aircraft was third in line to land. Realizing that their fuel had dropped to a critical level, the crew immediately informed air traffic control that they could not delay any further. Continued holding could soon become a fuel emergency. But the situation worsened rapidly. Visibility deteriorated even more, down to 275 meters, forcing the captain to abort the approach once again. Under such dangerously low visibility, a go-around was the only option left. A race against time. The crisis deepened, the weather grew worse, night was falling, and the fuel supply had nearly reached its limit. At 6:12 p.m., the crew officially declared minimum fuel remaining, reporting that only 1.1 tons of fuel were left. According to company procedures, this information should have been reported earlier, immediately upon diverting to Lucknow. Given that an Airbus A320neo typically burns 2.2 to 2.5 tons of fuel per hour, this meant the aircraft had barely 20 to 30 minutes of flying time left. After the go-around, the aircraft continued circling at low altitude, hoping for an improvement in the weather. But the storm did not weaken. It became even more violent. Minutes later, the situation reached a critical stage. The fuel warning lights began flashing yellow, indicating a severe fuel shortage. Fully aware of the danger, the crew issued a Mayday fuel emergency. Tension in the cockpit reached the breaking point. The pilots desperately searched for a solution. With fuel nearly exhausted and weather still deteriorating, the crew first considered diverting to Kanpur, but the route ahead was also stormy, forcing them instead to look toward Prayagraj. However, the captain was deeply concerned. Their remaining fuel might not even be enough to reach Prayagraj, let alone complete a safe landing. To make matters worse, the aircraft's flight management system, FMS, did not contain navigation data for either Kanpur or Prayagraj. The crew would have to navigate manually, and they also lacked the instrument approach charts for both airports, since Vistara Airlines did not normally operate there. Flying in unfamiliar airspace with limited data was extremely risky, and the stress on the pilots was overwhelming. A narrow window of hope. Just as the crisis peaked, a faint glimmer of hope appeared. While heading toward Prayagraj, air traffic control sent a new update. Visibility at Lucknow had improved to 600 meters. Though still barely above the limit, this met the minimum requirement for an Airbus A320 to attempt landing. The captain hesitated, fearing the weather might worsen again. Then another message came through. Radar indicated that visibility was continuing to improve, now between 800 and 1,000 meters. Controllers advised, "You may return to Lucknow." This change completely reversed their fate. With fuel almost gone, the crew made the decisive call to return to Lucknow. The last landing. The captain focused every ounce of attention on performing an instrument landing system, ILS, approach to runway 27. Despite the crosswinds and poor visibility, they had no other choice. They had to land, no matter what. Every second counted. The pilots worked in perfect coordination, knowing this was their final chance.
The approach was extremely difficult. The aircraft shook violently in turbulence, and rain hammered against the fuselage like bullets. Inside the cockpit, tension was at its peak. The crew fought to keep the aircraft steady. As the plane descended rapidly through the fog, passengers gripped their seats tightly, bracing for a possible crash landing. Then, through the mist, the runway lights appeared. Seconds later, at 6:48 p.m., the aircraft touched down safely. A wave of relief swept through the cockpit and cabin. But when the pilots looked at the fuel gauge, they were shocked. Only 348 kilograms of fuel remained. At normal burn rate, that amount would have lasted barely 5 minutes of flight. They had escaped disaster by mere minutes. Aftermath. Investigators later concluded that if the crew had continued toward Prayagraj, the aircraft would have run out of fuel before reaching the destination. Although the crew technically followed company procedures, their actions revealed a serious lack of judgment and situational awareness in a crisis. The pilots had fixated on reaching Lucknow, ignoring the worsening weather, the fuel emergency, and the more practical diversion options. Despite the severity of the incident, regulators decided not to revoke the pilots' licenses. The event sparked widespread concern about pilot decision-making under extreme pressure, fuel safety management, and risk assessment within modern aviation operations.